Welcome to the final part in this series of presentations where we're looking at the Gospel of Matthew. As usual, let's look back at the previous presentation. Injustice enacted. The trial, the flogging, the crucifixion of Jesus. The cross is a central place in the New Testament. It is a central place with the followers of Jesus down through history, and yet the cross is an instrument of torture. That's strange. In fact, it's the most barbaric and humiliating form of torture that we humans have invented. And it was used by the Romans just over a few centuries to terrorize people that they conquered. People were made to watch it. This is what will happen to you if you don't do what we want. And yet the cross, this instrument of torture, has been taken and becomes the centerpiece of the way of Jesus. It shows that violence never wins. It shows a lot more than that. The Roman Empire's gone. The entire Jewish religious system, the temple, the nation, as was known then, gone. The kingdom of Jesus has grown and spread throughout all the world. Because suffering love always wins. Jesus suffered. He took on the worst that we humans could do to him when politics and religion combine. He went through it willingly for us to take in himself the penalty of all the evil that we can do to each other. He defeated the power of violence. He defeated the power of coercion. He defeated the very power of Satan himself, and he releases through the cross life and hope to humanity, if only we come to him and follow in his ways. The death of Jesus at a human physical level. The evidence that he died is overwhelming. I've stressed this simply because there's such a strong move coming from the Islamic world to deny it. The evidence shows that Jesus was crucified. He did die. And there were momentous events that followed his death. His death has made a lasting impact. At the moment, impacting about a third of the world's population. It's felt right across humanity. He died for humanity in our place to defeat the power of human rebellion and to make it possible for us to be set free and to give humanity hope. Let's move forward now to a new beginning. We pick up the story at verse 57. As evening approached, that's the evening of the crucifixion, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate ordered that it be given to him. Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, placed it in his own tomb that he'd cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting there opposite the tomb. We know he had help to do this. Someone who was wealthy. He knew the access to the positions of power, and it was within the right of the Roman governor to release the body to relatives. Joseph, a follower, was allowed to bury the body. The next day, that's the Saturday, the one after Preparation Day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate Sir, they said, we remember that while he was still alive, that the deceiver said, after 3 days I will rise again. So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise his disciples may come and steal the body until the people has been raised from the dead. This last deception will be worse than the first. Take a guard, Pilate answered. Go, make the tomb as secure as you know how. So they went and made the tomb secure by putting a seal in the tomb, seal on the stone, and posting the guard. The burial of Jesus. We saw last time that it was very often that dead crucified victims were often left hanging on the cross. Now relatives could ask for the body to give them some sort of burial, but often they were just left for scavenging animals to deal with them. Joseph seeks permission. Now we have to remember the way that time is counted in the Jewish system of the day. The Sabbath started at 6 p.m. on the Friday evening, and it ran till 6 p.m. on the Saturday evening. So the burial had to be completed under Jewish law before 6 p.m. He died at 3. Time was limited. So burial was in a nearby cave, carved out of the limestone, the common pattern of the time. And Joseph and Nicodemus, his friend, probably both with servants, the body be wrapped in a shroud, the minimum of attention done to it, but with due respect following the Jewish customs, they buried him in a cave. The cave had never been used for a burial. Most caves were burials for an entire family group, with ledges for each of the corpses. So it was empty, and Jesus was put on one of the ledges. The entrance covered by a very large stone. Now the stone was very large. It had to keep people out who might come in to steal things, or it might had to keep animals out that might come in to scavenge. And the tomb was guarded by the Jewish guards all night. Through the Saturday it was to be, and on into the 3rd day, which was the Sunday. And they sealed the tomb, some sort of wax seal, so that any movement in the stone would be noticed, the seal would be broken. Let's stop for a minute and look at the role of women in all of this. We see from the account in Luke's Gospel all the way back that Jesus clearly had a group of women who travelled with the group, himself and his disciples. It was quite a big group. Several names are mentioned at various places. So the group, these were all people from the north, from the Galilee area. The mother of 2 of the disciples, his own mother. Various people were there. Mary was a very common name at that time. And Matthew notes that 2 Marys, sat and observed the entire burial procedure. And they noticed that it had to be done in a hurry. It had been done with reverence and care, but it had been done in a hurry. And that led them to want to come back to complete any embalming procedures. Let's just look at the evidence of this, because so much has been said and written, particularly in the last couple of 100 years, to undermine the crucifixion and the burial of Jesus. A lot of people saw the crucifixion, and we'll notice this last time. Roman soldiers, their lives were on the line if they got it wrong. And the one person who would know that her eldest son was being executed would be his mother. The burial itself was witnessed by a lot. Joseph and Nicodemus were both involved, well-known figures in the area. Women watched it. There were Jewish guards posted. Interestingly, no disciples were involved, or at least it's recorded, not recorded any were involved. In fact, they were probably in hiding for fear of their lives. You see, it's almost as if Matthew is presenting carefully every piece of evidence to show that you can't explain away these events, and in particular, you can't explain away the resurrection. The other three Gospels are remarkably consistent, but they do bring in extra details here and there. They're not identical, as might be expected. 4 witness accounts see things slightly differently. The evidence is incredibly strong. But we do know that historically, the Jews did spread stories. They died away after a while. And it was built around the idea that the body of Jesus had been stolen by his disciples, by a group of men who were in fear for their lives. But the fact they did spread the stories indicates that they admitted that the tomb was empty and that they couldn't produce the body. The evidence says that Jesus was dead, and the Romans checked it by pushing a spear up under his ribcage through his heart, itself fatal. The evidence shows that Jesus was buried in a tomb, witnessed by several, and the tomb had never been used, so there was no confusion over bodies. The evidence shows that the tomb was protected. The Jewish temple guard was on duty. And a very large stone, it would have taken more than one man even to move it at all. This was sealed and guarded. After the Sabbath, now that's the Saturday, which finished at 6 p.m. on the Saturday, at dawn on the first day of the week, now that's the Sunday morning at dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. They were going to complete any embalming processes. A violent earthquake. For an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and going to the tomb rolled back the stone and sat in it. His appearance was like lightning and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples he is risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him." Now I've told you. The angels moved the stone back, not to let Jesus out, but to let people see that Jesus was no longer there. So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid, yet filled with joy, ran to tell the disciples. One of the other Gospels explains that the disciples didn't really believe them. Suddenly Jesus met the women. "Greetings," he said. They came to him and clasped his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, for there you will see me." So we've moved to the Sunday morning. Let's just summarize the key events as recorded by Matthew. Dawn on the Sunday. 2 ladies called Mary go to the tomb. They probably had multiple reasons, but one of the other Gospels explains that they did go in order to complete some of the burial ceremonies, and they were unprepared because they didn't know how they were going to move the stone. 2 ladies wouldn't be strong enough to move it. But the stone had been rolled away, described as a violent earthquake. They found an angel sitting on the stone. Now there's a picture of the kind of tomb. This was a normal traditional way that well-off people At that time in Jewish society, they were buried. It would be a family tomb. The rock there is limestone. It can be chiseled out with a lot of effort, but it's not impossible. Ledges would be carved inside the tomb. The bodies would be wrapped in a shroud. Spices would be put on them to keep out the terrible smell as they decayed. And they'd be laid in the tomb. And the large stone would be slid along, kind of runners along the bottom, with great effort, to seal the tomb from grave robbers and to seal the tomb from wild animals. The guards were transfixed, absolutely terrified. The angel speaks to the women, and the women set off to tell the disciples, fearful but joyful, a combination of reactions which is entirely to be expected. And the way Jesus meets them. Now that's the events as recorded in Matthew's Gospel. There's a recognition by the angel or angels that the women were in fear and uncertainty. They weren't transfixed with terror like the guards, but nonetheless they were fearful, uncertain. They had come to pay their respects to their dead master. They had come to complete the embalming processes if they could gain any access to the tomb. They didn't know how they were going to do it. And then they find this. The language is very abrupt. The invitation not to be alarmed is just 3 words. Not fear you. That's the kind of way the language in the original would be used. But the you is plural, the ladies. Not fear you. Great emphasis on the not and then the you. There was an understanding of how these women would be feeling. The angel or angels know they're looking for the body of Jesus. Now they can gain access to the tomb. The angel explains he was crucified but is now alive, having risen. And the word there implies bodily resurrection. It's not into some spirit existence. And they invite the ladies to look inside the tomb and see the body is not there. Now we don't know whether they did or not, but we do know that Peter and John, when they came along very quickly afterwards, informed by the women, they didn't believe the women, so they ran to the tomb, and they did go inside and look at it and found the body was not there. The grave clothes were there, but not the body. There is the evidence of the empty tomb. Now Jesus had predicted it would happen. He had warned and tried to prepare his disciples that he was going to Jerusalem, he was going to be arrested, he was going to be crucified, and on the 3rd day he would rise. He was crucified on the Friday, the 3rd day is the Sunday, the way they counted the days at that time. The women were given instructions. Go and tell the disciples. And one of the Gospels says, and Peter. Remember Peter, who had denied Jesus in the courtyard of the high priest, let Jesus down so badly. Peter needed reassured. And then the angel says, well, go back to the Galilee. Now that was where they all came from. They were not southern people, Jerusalem people. And there'll be a big gathering there with Jesus. Now we do know that Jesus met the disciples in the Jerusalem area a few times, but in fact they did go back to the Galilee where there was a great reunion. Now it's very important in this to recognize that the 4 gospel accounts, and remember these are the only 4 that are eyewitness accounts. The gospel accounts are not simply accounts of the resurrection of Jesus. when we look at them, they are seeking in different ways for different audiences. They're seeking to present the clear evidence that Jesus has risen. The entire story of Jesus, the good news of Jesus, and all the events and the call of Jesus, the formation of the kingdom, all of this is built on evidence, and evidence that is tied into history that can be checked and checked again. It's not opinion, it's not make-believe. It's a fashion today to regard religion as a harmless delusion where people believe what they want to believe. That's not the way of the New Testament. The New Testament is a highly logical document, and it presents the evidence, and the evidence is things that we can check. So Matthew's story, as one of the four Gospels, is a demonstration of the fact, with evidence, that Jesus has risen. It's not make-believe. It's not just a story. It actually happened. But it's worth remembering that the first people to meet the risen Jesus were women, and at that time women were second-class citizens in the society. The society was totally revolving around men. Women were not listened to. Their views, their opinions, their thoughts were not regarded seriously. Jesus changed the whole status of women. You can see it throughout his life in the way he treated women with respect. But he revealed himself after his resurrection to the women first. The men were in hiding for their lives. The women had the courage to go and visit the tomb. Where we as the followers of Jesus throughout the world have failed to follow in that and have denied women the equal opportunities and the proper status of equality, then we are not matching our lives up to the way of Jesus. Back to evidence. I'm going to list bits of evidence here. The ones in the pale blue background are from Matthew's Gospel. I put in one or two more in the dark blue background that are drawn from one or other of the other Gospel accounts. The death of Jesus was observed by large numbers round the cross, and the Romans checked he was dead by a fatal stabbing. Standard procedure. He was buried in an unused tomb, and the burial was carried out by two men, probably with servants, not just one person. It would need two to carry the corpse. The burial was observed by a group. The tomb was then closed and sealed. Nobody could get in or out. It was then guarded. The women see the body gone. The angels speak of his resurrection. The women then meet Jesus. Just imagine the reaction and impact. Utter bewilderment, yet joy. The women tell the disciples, and Peter and John run to the tomb. They don't believe the women. Peter goes in first and sees the body gone. The simple fact is that none of his followers expected a resurrection. It was beyond their understanding. Death was the end. It was a terrible end because there was no way to get round it. And indeed there still isn't. Now, throughout the Gospel accounts, there are numerous meetings with Jesus recorded after his resurrection. But the focus in Matthew is the coming together back in home territory in the Galilee. That's where it all came to an end. Oh, but people have put up alternative explanations. Many people have realized that if you can undermine the resurrection of Jesus, you actually undermine the entire gospel stories. The whole thing becomes questionable. So people have put up alternative explanations, and these have been explored and examined in forensic detail by experts from various fields, legal and medical. Today in the Islamic world, it is taught dogmatically that Jesus was not crucified. Someone took his place. The evidence contradicts it at every turn. There is not one shred of evidence anywhere from any of the literatures of the time, or indeed the evidence of the way things were done. There's not one shred of evidence for this. It's just a wild assertion. Some have argued that Jesus revived in the cool of the tomb. Medical experts have looked at that. It's just a nonsense. He was stabbed through the heart for a start. But medically, nobody survives a crucifixion. That was the story the Jews put out. They admitted the body was gone. All they had to do was produce the body, but they couldn't do that. Where were the disciples? They were not on home territory in Jerusalem. They were from the Galilee. Where they were going to hide a body? How were they going to get past the guards, make an awful lot of noise, getting the stone moved apart, and get the body out? How on earth were they going to do that? Impossible. And others say, well, the whole thing is just a figment of imagination. It was just a good ending to a story that came to a sticky end. It was entirely made up. That contradicts an awful lot of evidence. The disciples did not even believe it had happened when it had happened. When the women came and told them, they didn't believe it. Peter and John ran to the tomb to see it for themselves. They weren't expecting it. They didn't believe it. Would a group of frightened men make up a story like that? And would you put your life on the line, as many of them did later on in life, and followers of Jesus have done it down through history, for something that you know is a lie? Psychological nonsense. Jesus 3 times had tried to predict and get it across to his disciples that it would happen. The first time, just before they set out for Jerusalem from the north, Peter's reaction, "This shall never happen to you." He rejected it. He didn't get it. They were together, gathering together to travel south. They will kill him and the third day be raised to life, but the disciples were filled with grief. They got the killing and they knew his life would be at risk, but they didn't get the resurrection. Who would? Would we have got it? This time there's no reaction. He's now on his way to Jerusalem. He's getting close. No reaction is recorded. But the behavior of the disciples indicated that while they knew that Jesus was heading to be captured, they had not an inkling of a clue to grasp resurrection, bodily resurrection, which is what the language means. That was beyond their understanding. They couldn't get it. And we wouldn't have got it either. Stop for a minute. When he was in Jerusalem, he We saw this in chapter 24. The magnificent temple building, and they were sitting opposite the building. And he said, "Do you see all these things? Truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down." This was a magnificent building, and the blocks of stone from which it was made were enormous. Jesus predicted the entire sacking of the temple and its destruction. In AD 70, it happened. It's all gone, and it has never been rebuilt. And on the Temple Mount today is the Alaska Mosque. His prediction came true exactly as he said. Not one stone left on another. That literally happened. The Romans were so fed up. And it was a big job to take it down and smash it to bits. While the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priests everything that had happened. When the chief priests had met with the elders and devised a plan, they gave the soldiers a large sum of money, bribing them. "You are to say his disciples came during the night and stole him away while we were asleep. If this report gets to the governor, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble." So the soldiers took the money, did as they were instructed, and this story has been widely circulated among the Jews to this very day. That story went on into the 2nd century. They concoct a story to explain it away, and they bribe their temple guards. The tomb is empty. The women saw it. The guards saw it. They saw the same thing, but their deductions and behavior were totally different. The women report back to the disciples, "Jesus has risen." The disciples didn't believe them. They report back to the leaders in Jerusalem, their bosses. What's happened? We don't know. The same events were seen. It all leads to a reunion in the Galilee, back where it all started. It leads to a pack of lies, a cover-up story. The net outcome? From that reunion in the Galilee, the number of followers of Jesus grew steadily despite brutal persecution. It grew throughout the Roman Empire and all the nations ruled by the Roman Empire, throughout the world, and it's still growing today. The kingdom of Jesus keeps expanding. By contrast, the entire religious system that these Jewish religious leaders were trying to protect and their cozy way of life was completely and totally and finally destroyed. The two different outcomes. Back to evidence. A very perceptive saying said by somebody else. We do not see things as they are, but we see things as we are. The religious leaders wanted to protect their closely religious system and their cozy way of life and their power base. So they make up a pack of lies. The women saw what was happening, accepted the angel's explanation. He has risen. We see things as we are. They were open. The key thing is to look at that word evidence. Now we find this so difficult. We come to everything with preconceived ideas. It's true in all things within our church lives. It's true in everything in life. Oh, to step back from our preconceived ideas and look at the evidence and get that central. And step away from our preconceived notions and our personal desires. And the Gospel finishes, then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus told them to go, the hills round about. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. Familiar words. Back to where it all started. In the heady days where Jesus started out as a teacher and healer, bringing hope and life to people wherever he went, where he was training and preparing that inner group of friends to go on with the work he started. Now it was over to them. The next stage starts. He didn't leave any chain of command. He didn't leave any organizational structure. He didn't leave anyone in control. He didn't leave any supreme leader. It's all the followers of Jesus. We carry it forward to the next stage. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. There was probably a big group there for at least part of the time. The word worship there, it actually just means bowing with respect, so we have to watch that we don't overemphasize that. It's a typical word of bowing for respect in the societies of the day, someone whom we respect and honor. And the word doubted doesn't imply intellectual doubt. It's a different word. It's a kind of practical uncertainty. There's a hesitation. It's totally understandable. Jesus, who'd been crucified, now resurrected. That kind of rocks people back. Uncertainty. That kind of uncertainty and hesitation is not wrong. We need to come through it, look at the evidence, and move forward to realize what actually had happened. And for some it took longer than others. Let's look at that familiar bit at the very end there. Now I'm just going to adjust the words very slightly. Let's look at some key points. I'm adjusting them to try and capture the meaning of the original slightly more clearly. It doesn't read as well. The word nations there is the word that's used for all ethnic groups throughout the world. Their world was the Roman Empire, which was big, but the whole world. There is no limit. Jesus had moved beyond the Jewish nation to the entire world. And obey is not obeying a system of rules. That's the way of religion. The word obey there, carrying the idea of paying attention to the kind of kingdom living that Jesus wants from us. We have to live the Jesus way. We're called to do it. He will help us. He will enable it to happen. He will provide the Holy Spirit. But we've got to want it. So we've got to listen and learn to what He wants. Completion of the age, translated as the end of the age, end is completion. It's a strong word. They thought at that time of time, and their concepts of time were different from ours. They thought of it as they were living in an age when some things were good and some things were bad, and that would come to an end when God would intervene and things would all be good. That's the kind of way of thinking. It wasn't clearly formulated. We could put it in Christian terms as saying when Jesus returns and He puts everything right. But they thought of time divided into ages. So the age that we've got this now, which is an age of good and bad mixed up imperfections, Jesus will continue with us throughout that. In the original, it says going. It doesn't say go. Probably the best translation is simply to say, as you go throughout life, make disciples of all nations. The only command of Jesus is make disciples. It's going, baptizing, teaching, which is part of making disciples. But the central point is make disciples. So let's make that the central point. And it involves the three things. Going. It's not just for people who go to some far distant land or people who go into full-time ministry. It's for all of us. As we go throughout life where people are, where we meet people, we make disciples, and when they come to their first step of commitment, we baptize them. It's their outer declaration of inner commitment. We saw that in the teaching of Jesus in one of the earlier presentations. And we've got to remember, as we saw before, that teaching is not teaching as we see it today. This is not someone standing up on a pulpit or platform teaching. That's not the way the word and the idea was used at that time. This is relating to being an apprentice. We're all helping each other, enabling us, encouraging us, supporting to live the way of Jesus. We become disciples of Jesus together, and together we help each other to go his way. That's what making disciples involves. Back to the text, but this time I've highlighted in red things that stress the universality of it. All authority. Jesus had won the battle. He defeated the enemy. He defeated all the powers of human rebellion. He'd won through. The resurrection demonstrated it to the world. All authority. No limitations. He is God in every way. And he passes that authority to us, which is why he said it. We are his delegates to make disciples of all nations. There are no restrictions. There are no second-class citizens. Everything. Not a pick and mix. We live the way of Jesus. And he'll always be with us. When we need his help, when we ask for his help, when we don't know what to do, when we're uncertain, when we have doubts, he's there. When we're facing impossible situations and terrible persecution, he's there. And it will go on till he winds everything up. But the starting point is that. And one of the things that we've got to capture today amongst the people of Jesus is to understand what it means to walk in the authority of Jesus. Not usurping his authority, but acting on his behalf to bring blessing and help and enabling to those around, no matter who they are, what they've done, or what their needs may be. We are the hands and feet of Jesus in the world today. Bringing it together, Matthew has provided strong evidence in his account. He's so systematic in his thinking. Jesus lived. Jesus died. Jesus was buried, and Jesus rose. Death could not hold him. He won the victory. He defeated all the powers of evil in the world. He defeated the powers of human rebellion and all the evil things we've done. He defeated the combined power of political and religious systems. He won the battle. And he's exalted. He was raised. Bodily, physical resurrection. The template and model for all humanity. and he releases his authority to us to go and make disciples. That's our task, that's our mandate, and he will enable us to do it. That fulfills the Lord's Prayer, your kingdom come. We are here to bring in the kingdom by drawing other people in, pointing them to the way of Jesus and encouraging them along the way, encouraging each other as apprentices of Jesus, to live his way, to make an impact, and to bring benefit to all around. You could summarize it that way. That's mind-blowing. We are invited, all of us, to share with Jesus in releasing and equipping others to live his way. We don't have the answers. We're not clever. We're not superior. We're all in the same boat. But he's invited us that when we find our life in him, in the kingdom, when we commit ourselves to him to live his way by his grace, he invites us to share with him, to help others, and to bring hope and light to the world around. That is the Gospel of Matthew.